There comes a moment in every life when a certain truth becomes impossible to ignore. People do not treat you the way you deserve. They treat you the way you allow. That single realization is where transformation begins. If you have ever been overlooked, taken for granted, spoken to without care, or treated as though your patience was a weakness to exploit, then pay close attention. What follows is not about becoming someone to fear. It is about becoming someone whose presence quietly demands respect without ever raising a voice. You do not need to shout to be heard. You do not need to threaten anyone to be taken seriously. You do not need to prove your power for it to exist. Real strength is quieter than that. It shows up in small, repeated choices. The choice to stay composed under pressure. The choice to keep a promise nobody is watching you keep. The choice to stop performing for approval you no longer need. When you govern your own emotions instead of being governed by them, people notice, even if they never say so out loud. When you do what you said you would do, people notice. When you stop chasing the validation of others, people notice most of all. And slowly, without a single confrontation, they begin to understand something important. There are consequences to disrespecting this person, not because you punished them, not because you made a scene, but because your character made the cost of crossing you clear. Think about what happens when someone learns they can say anything to you and be forgiven instantly. They keep crossing the line because nothing tells them not to. Think about what happens when someone realizes you need their approval more than you need your own peace. They begin to use their opinion of you as a leash. Think about what happens when someone knows you will always answer the call, always show up, always make time, no matter how you've been treated. They stop valuing the time you give them because it costs you something and them nothing. But something shifts the moment you become disciplined enough to walk away from what diminishes you. Your silence stops feeling like weakness and starts feeling like weight. Your no stops being a suggestion and becomes a decision. Your presence changes shape entirely. You stop over-explaining yourself to people who were never going to listen. You stop debating with people who have already decided to misunderstand you on purpose. You stop trying to convince the world of your worth, and instead, you start building something no argument can take from you: self-respect. Because here is a truth worth sitting with. The strongest person in a room is rarely the loudest one. More often, it is the person sitting quietly, observing carefully, speaking only when it matters, and never once betraying their own values just to keep the peace. So ask yourself something honest today. Are people disrespecting you because they are simply bad people, or have you, without realizing it, taught them that disrespecting you comes at no cost at all? That single question has the power to rearrange your entire life, because the moment you change what you tolerate, you change how people experience you. And the moment you change yourself, you stop needing to force respect out of anyone. Your discipline starts speaking for you. Your boundaries start speaking for you. Your actions start speaking for you. And eventually, your character speaks louder than any words ever could. So do not aim to become dangerous just so people fear you. Aim to become strong enough that you can no longer be easily manipulated, easily broken, or easily controlled. That is where real power begins, not in intimidation, but in immunity to it. Stop chasing approval. The first real step toward earning genuine respect is learning to stop chasing approval. This is one of the hardest lessons anyone learns, because from early childhood, most of us are trained to seek acceptance. We are taught, often without words, that being liked equals being safe. So we grow up wanting people to approve of us, agree with us, include us, praise us, understand us. But the moment your sense of worth becomes dependent on how other people respond to you, you have quietly handed them the keys to your emotional state. Consider how much energy disappears into that pursuit. You send a message and then sit there, refreshing, waiting for a reply that will tell you how to feel for the next hour. Someone gives you a strange look, and suddenly you are replaying the last 10 minutes trying to figure out what you did wrong. Someone criticizes a decision you made with full confidence, and within seconds, you're questioning a path you were sure of. Someone fails to acknowledge your effort, and you feel, however briefly, like none of it mattered. That is not confidence. That is emotional dependence wearing the mask of humility. Real confidence begins the moment you understand something simple but rarely practiced. Your value does not increase because someone praised you, and it does not decrease because someone dismissed you. You do not need everyone to understand the path you're walking. You do not need everyone's blessing on your decisions. You do not owe an explanation for every choice you make. In fact, sometimes the most powerful sentence you can offer the world is silence. Once you stop chasing approval, your behavior starts to shift in ways people can feel, even if they can't name them. You stop saying yes when your entire body is screaming no. You stop laughing along with disrespect just to avoid tension. You stop performing agreement out of fear that disagreement will get you rejected. You stop shape-shifting your personality depending on who happens to be standing in front of you. And people notice, not because you announced a change, but because you no longer ask for their permission to simply be yourself. But here is where it's important to be precise, because this idea gets misunderstood constantly. Confidence is not arrogance. Confidence does not mean believing you are superior to everyone around you. Arrogance needs an audience to survive. It withers without attention. Confidence needs no audience at all. A genuinely confident person can walk into a crowded room and feel no urge to dominate it. They can listen to another point of view without feeling threatened by it. They can absorb criticism without collapsing into defensiveness. They can say, "I was wrong," without feeling smaller for saying it. And most importantly, they can walk away from something that violates their principles, even when walking away is the harder, lonelier option. This is where real power quietly takes root. So start with something small but foundational. Start keeping the promises you make to yourself. If you tell yourself you'll wake up early, even when no one will know if you don't. If you say you'll study, even on the night you'd rather not. If you decide to improve your body, your mind, or your career, stay with that decision when there is no applause, no witness, no one to impress. Every single time you keep a promise to yourself, you are quietly building evidence, real, undeniable evidence, that you can be trusted by the one person you can never escape, yourself. And once you trust yourself, the desperate search for outside validation begins to fade on its own. You stop trying to look impressive and start becoming disciplined instead, which is a very different, much quieter kind of powerful. This shift matters because people who are constantly hunting for approval are, whether they realize it or not, easy to manipulate. Someone can control them with a compliment. Someone can control them with silence. Someone can control them with rejection, criticism, or even affection used strategically. But once you become genuinely comfortable in your own skin, those levers stop working. You don't need to make anyone afraid of you. You need to become so internally grounded that disrespect no longer has the power to dictate your emotional state. Let some people misread you. Let some people dislike you for reasons that have nothing to do with who you actually are. Let some people walk out of your life entirely. Your responsibility was never to be liked by everyone. It was always to become someone you can look at honestly, alone, in silence, and still respect. Because the moment you stop chasing approval, you stop outsourcing your identity to the world's opinion. You begin deciding who you are, and then, this is the important part, you begin actually living that way. Respect begins where unnecessary tolerance ends. If you want people to genuinely understand that disrespecting you carries consequences, you first have to get honest with yourself about what you will and will not accept. A boundary is not a threat. It is not a weapon. It is simply a clear decision about how you expect to be treated, paired with a clear understanding of what you will do when that standard is crossed. Most people struggle with boundaries for one simple reason: fear. Fear that saying no will make them look selfish. Fear that holding a line will make them seem difficult, cold, or unreasonable. So they tolerate the first small violation, then a slightly bigger one. Someone interrupts them again and again, and they stay quiet. Someone cancels plans repeatedly, and they keep accepting the same worn-out excuse. Someone speaks to them in a tone that stings, and they laugh it off to avoid conflict. And somewhere along the way, without a single word being exchanged about it, the other person learns something crucial. There is no real consequence to crossing this person's limits. That is precisely how disrespect quietly becomes a habit, not through one dramatic betrayal, but through 100 small, unchallenged ones. Here is the part worth remembering. You cannot control how another person chooses to behave, but you can control what access they're given to your life, your time, your attention, and your peace. That single principle is the foundation of every strong boundary that has ever existed. If someone repeatedly speaks to you with disrespect, you do not need to scream to match their energy. You do not need to retaliate with insults of your own. You can simply look at them, stay level, and say something like, "I'm willing to keep talking about this, but I won't continue if you speak to me that way." And then, this is the part most people skip. You actually have to be willing to leave the conversation if it continues anyway. The power was never really in the sentence itself. The power lives entirely in the consistency behind it. When you set a boundary, keep it simple. You do not owe anyone a 30-minute justification. You do not need to build an elaborate case or a long list of excuses to earn the right to have a limit. "No, I can't do that. I'm not comfortable with that. Please don't speak to me that way. If this continues, I'm going to leave." These sentences are plain, almost unremarkable on paper, but delivered calmly and backed by consistent follow-through, they become some of the most powerful words you can say. And remember, boundaries are not only something you set for other people, they are promises you make to yourself. If you decide you will no longer accept repeated disrespect, then honor that decision the way you'd honor a promise to someone you love. If someone keeps crossing the same line over and over, resist the urge to keep handing them new chances simply because confrontation feels uncomfortable. You are allowed to forgive someone without restoring their old level of access to your life. You are allowed to care about someone deeply and still refuse to tolerate the way they treat you. You are allowed to love someone and still walk away from a pattern that is hurting you. This is exactly where kindness gets misunderstood so often. Many people believe kindness means being endlessly, unconditionally available, that saying no somehow cancels out the compassion in your heart. It doesn't. You can be deeply compassionate and still be firm. You can have a gentle heart and unshakable boundaries, living in the same person at the same time. The goal was never to make people fear you. The goal is simply to make your standards unmistakably clear and then live in a way that proves you meant it. When people see that your words and your actions actually match, they start taking you seriously in a way they never did before. If you say you'll leave a disrespectful conversation, leave. If you say you won't take part in something that compromises your values, don't take part. If someone keeps violating your boundaries despite every warning, create real distance, not as a punishment, but as self-preservation. You don't have to announce your boundaries with drama or ultimatums. Live them quietly, because genuine self-respect was never something that needed an audience to validate it. Eventually, people come to understand, not because you told them, but because your behavior proved it, that they cannot treat you however they wish and still expect unlimited access to your time, your energy, and your presence. That is the moment respect becomes natural instead of demanded. Mastering your emotions. If you want to become someone people naturally respect, you have to learn to govern your emotions, not because feeling things is a weakness, but because uncontrolled reactions hand other people a direct line into your mind. Anyone can make you angry if they know exactly which words will land. Anyone can shatter your peace if they know precisely which buttons to press. But the moment you learn to pause before reacting, you take that power back into your own hands. Picture this. Someone insults you in front of other people. Your first instinct might be to fire back immediately, to defend yourself on the spot, to prove in real time that you cannot be disrespected, to make sure everyone watching understands you won't be pushed around. But often, the strongest response is not the fastest one. Take a breath. Look at the situation for what it actually is. Ask yourself a simple question. If I react purely on emotion right now, who is actually in control of this moment? Because if another person's words can instantly dictate your next move, then in that instant, they hold real influence over you, whether you like it or not. Emotional discipline is really just the practice of creating space between what happens to you and what you consciously choose to do about it. Someone criticizes you. You can choose to listen without unraveling. Someone disagrees with you. You can choose to stay calm rather than combative. Someone tries to provoke you. You can choose to pause instead of biting. Someone walks away from you. You can choose to accept it with grace instead of chasing an explanation. None of this means becoming cold or emotionless. It means refusing to let a temporary feeling make a permanent decision on your behalf. Anger, especially, becomes dangerous the moment it's allowed to become your decision maker. In the grip of anger, people say things they don't mean, damage relationships they actually treasure, and create entirely avoidable problems that 5 minutes of patience could have prevented. Real strength is not the ability to explode. Real strength is having every reason to explode and choosing deliberately not to. Start paying attention to your own triggers. Notice what makes you defensive before you even understand why. Notice when your voice starts to shift, when your pulse quickens, when that familiar urge to prove yourself begins to rise. These moments, uncomfortable as they are actually opportunities, chances to practice the exact kind of control that builds lasting respect. Before you respond to anything that stings, pause, take one breath, then another. Ask yourself a question that can save you from more unnecessary conflict than almost anything else. What response would make me proud of myself tomorrow morning? It also helps to remember that not every act of disrespect deserves your attention. Some people provoke others purely because they enjoy the reaction it produces. If you take the bait every single time, they learn they can control your emotional state whenever it's convenient for them. But imagine the opposite scenario. They try to provoke you and you remain completely level. They expect an argument and instead you simply say, "I understand that's your opinion." They expect defensiveness and instead you calmly continue on with your day, undisturbed. That kind of composure is quietly powerful because it communicates something unmistakable. Your peace is not available for anyone else to manipulate. That said, emotional control is not the same as silently absorbing disrespect forever. You can be calm and still be firm at the same time. You can say plainly, "I won't accept being spoken to like that," without ever raising your voice. You can leave a room without slamming a single door behind you. You can create distance without staging a scene. Calmness and boundaries are not opposites. They were always meant to work together. The more you practice this kind of discipline, the less you feel the need to prove anything to anyone. You stop reacting to every stray opinion thrown your way. You stop arguing with every critic who was never going to change their mind. You stop chasing down every person who misunderstands you, as though their understanding was somehow required for your peace. You start choosing your battles with real intention. And that shift changes how people experience you entirely. They begin to realize they can no longer easily provoke you, manipulate you, or drag you into conflict you never agreed to. Your greatest power was never about making people afraid of your anger. It's about becoming so disciplined that your anger no longer has any authority over you. When you master yourself, other people quietly lose their ability to control you through your emotions. And that remains one of the most enduring forms of personal power a person can build. Let your actions do the talking. The deepest form of respect is never manufactured by demanding attention. It is built slowly and quietly by becoming a person whose actions consistently reflect strength, discipline, reliability, and self-respect. If you want people to think twice before disrespecting you, stop spending your energy trying to convince them of your power. Build a character that speaks for itself without needing your commentary. Your words carry very little weight if your actions keep contradicting them. You can tell someone you're disciplined, but if you can't keep the smallest promises to yourself, they will eventually notice the gap. You can tell someone you value your time, but if you're endlessly available the second anyone calls, your behavior tells a different story entirely. You can tell someone to respect your boundaries, but if you let those boundaries get crossed again and again without consequence, your words quietly lose their power, one violation at a time. Respect is built almost entirely through consistency. Do what you said you would do. Show up when you said you would show up. Keep your promises, even the small, unglamorous ones. Take responsibility the moment you make a mistake instead of deflecting it. And when you commit to something meaningful, don't abandon it the second the initial excitement fades. This, not any single dramatic moment, is how real character gets built, brick by unremarkable brick. You also have to become comfortable with walking away. Not every argument deserves your energy. Not every relationship deserves unrestricted access to your life. Not every person who enters your world is meant to stay in it. Walking away is not weakness. Sometimes it is the clearest possible proof that you value your own peace more than your ego. If someone keeps insulting you, you don't need to win a war of words against them. You can simply reduce how much room they take up in your life. If someone consistently disrespects your time, you can quietly stop making yourself so available. If someone repeatedly betrays your trust, you can create distance without needing to deliver a speech about it first. You don't owe the world an announcement for every decision you make. Sometimes you just make it. Competence matters here too. Become genuinely good at something. Keep learning. Take real ownership of your responsibilities. Become the kind of person others can depend on without having to ask twice. A person who is disciplined, capable, and dependable rarely needs to announce their own worth. Their results tend to speak long before they open their mouth. But be careful not to confuse respect with popularity, because they are not the same thing and sometimes pull in opposite directions. Popular people often live in quiet fear of disappointing others. Respected people are willing to make the harder, less comfortable decision when it matters. Sometimes earning respect looks like saying no in a moment when yes would have been easier. Sometimes it looks like openly admitting you were wrong. Sometimes it looks like standing alone while everyone around you moves in a different direction. And sometimes it simply means choosing long-term growth over the comfort of the present moment. The world, in the end, pays far more attention to patterns than it does to promises. If you consistently carry yourself with dignity, people learn exactly who you are over time. If you stay composed under pressure, they remember it. If you keep your word, even when it costs you something, they remember it. If you refuse to get pulled into unnecessary drama, they remember it. If you protect your boundaries without ever becoming aggressive about it, they remember that too. Eventually, your reputation begins doing work before you've even said a single word. People come to understand almost instinctively that you are not someone who can be easily manipulated. They understand that your kindness was never a sign of weakness. They understand that your patience, real as it is, still has a limit. They understand that being close to you comes with real standards attached. That is the kind of strength worth building, not the strength to intimidate anyone, but the strength to master yourself. The strength to walk away from whatever diminishes you. The strength to stand alone when standing alone is the right thing to do. The strength to keep going when no one is applauding. And above everything else, the strength to live according to your own principles, even when that is the harder path. When your life finally becomes consistent with your values, you stop chasing respect entirely, because you naturally become the kind of person who earns it without trying. A final thought. Before closing this out, sit with this for a moment. You don't need to make anyone afraid of you. You simply need to become someone who cannot be easily disrespected, manipulated, or controlled. Stop chasing approval. Know your own worth, even on the days nobody claps for you. Set real boundaries. Say no the moment something crosses your line, and have the courage to follow those words with real action. Govern your emotions. Don't let someone else's anger, criticism, or disrespect decide your peace for you. The instant you master your own reaction, you take your power back for good. And finally, let your actions do the talking. Keep your promises. Protect your time. Stay disciplined. Walk away when it's necessary. Become so consistent that people know exactly what you stand for without you having to say a word. Because real power was never about making people fear your anger. Real power is making people understand your standards. So here is the question worth carrying forward. What would change in your life if you stopped trying to be liked and started trying to become someone you truly respect? Sit with that. Because the moment you stop begging the world to recognize your value, you begin building a life that proves it without needing anyone's permission. You don't need to announce your strength. You don't need to threaten anyone. You don't need to win every argument you're pulled into. Build yourself quietly. Train your mind, strengthen your discipline, protect your peace, respect yourself, and let your character grow so steady and so strong that disrespect simply no longer finds a place in your life. Remember, you cannot control how everyone treats you, but you can always control who gets access to you, how you respond, and what you choose to tolerate. So walk away from this with one decision. From today onward, you will not chase respect. You will become worthy of it.